Last October, I released part 1 of what will now be a 3-part series on the music and How to Train Your Dragon. If you missed the first part, I'll have it linked right here for you. I encourage you to watch that part first, since I will be referencing it throughout this video. In that video, I discuss a theme called the friendship theme, because of how it illustrates the changing friendship between Hiccup the Viking and Toothless the Dragon. I also mentioned in that video how there is not much scholarly research on composer John Powell, and that one document that does exist is my master's thesis in musicology. I am shamelessly linking that again in this description. This video will again pull from that document. It is over 100 pages, so I might as well get a few videos out of it. I do want to take a minute to note once again that all the written music examples I will use in this video are my original transcriptions from my thesis. So don't at me Universal Records or John Powell. I'm not stealing, I promise. So again, if my music examples seem sparse, that is because they are transcriptions. This video does once again focus mainly on single line themes, so this isn't too much of an issue. If you are interested in more harmonies and orchestration and such, I encourage you to purchase a copy of the score for yourself. This time around, we'll be discussing what I have labeled the truth theme. In the published score, this is called the flying theme. Like the label flying theme motif for the friendship theme, calling the truth theme simply flying theme is again a huge simplification of how the theme functions in the film, which will hopefully become clear by the end of this video. In defense of the label flying theme, when the theme is presented in its entirety, it does clearly relate to flying. However, the theme is broken into pieces throughout the film and heard in instances that do not really relate to flying, which is why I find this an oversimplification. Unlike the title friendship theme, which I came up with on my own, I derived the title truth theme from an audio interview with Powell. In the interview, he states, "I try not to attach leitmotifs to characters, but to ideas. It's a little hard in films, if the leitmotif is just established purely on characters. The stories aren't constructed in that fashion. I mean, we have a tune called The Truth About Dragons, and having a title attached to an idea gives the theme the flexibility to work in lots of different ways. You can make it a dark tune about dragons, and you can make it a light tune about dragons, but it's the truth." End quote. I'll link the full interview in the description. It gave me a lot of insight into Powell's composition process, and is definitely worth the listen if you're a fan of his work. Although Powell does not specify which theme the crew called The Truth About Dragons, I believe that it is the theme discussed in this video because of how it functions throughout the film. The truth theme is broken into 4 4-measure segments shown here. Let's give each of these a listen. In order to really do this theme justice in the many ways it functions in the film, this video will focus on each time the partial theme occurs. I'll dedicate a future video to the full theme occurrences, which are tied mainly to flying and utilize the major friendship theme working in tandem with the truth theme. Powell constructs musical expectations in the film with only the first motive of the truth theme before the first flight, with the exception of motives 3 and 4 in the opening overture, which I'll discuss in a little bit. In this way, Powell is preparing the listener for the longer theme without spoiling the ending. This technique of a theme growing from a short motive is referred to as teleological genesis by film music scholar Tom Schneller. Teleological genesis is not exclusive to film music. We find this, for example, in Richard Strauss's tone poem Death and Transfiguration from 1889. Strauss begins with a simple 2-bar motive that expands throughout the piece, using the development of the motive to tell the story of the transfiguration of the dying artist in his tone poem. This is just one of many examples of the influence that concert music has had on film music development. Perhaps a concept I will dive into more deeply in a later video. The first motive of the truth theme is the first music heard in the film, which sets up the plot nicely. Powell juxtaposes this motive with the opening battle theme, which is shown here. These two themes represent contrasting ideas that are prevalent throughout the film. The opening battle theme highlights the Vikings' initial instinct to kill the dragons, whereas the truth theme represents their change in perspective brought about by Hiccup's friendship with Toothless. Let's listen to that battle theme to get it in your ear. The film opens with the truth theme before the story even begins, when the shadow of a dragon swoops past the clouds of the DreamWorks logo. The battle theme follows at a slower tempo than we would normally hear it. The slow battle theme proceeds into the third and fourth motives of the truth theme, only they are in compound meter here rather than simple as they normally appear everywhere else. This creates a smoother transition from the battle theme, which is in compound meter all throughout the film. The opening low brass drone, as well as the Scottish snap and the drum pattern that accompany the battle theme, help create a Celtic feel to the music. I explain what a Scottish snap is in my video on the music from the 2003 Hobbit video game, which I encourage you to check out if you haven't already. Furthermore, the compound meter of all the themes and the tin whistle and solo violin uttering the second half of the truth theme further establish a Celtic musical world for the Vikings in this opening segment. Above the music, Hiccup's voiceover presents a negative view of Berk's location and refers to the dragons as pests. The associations formed throughout the film by the truth theme and the opening battle theme foreshadow the change in perspective that is echoed in Hiccup's closing voiceover, where the word pests to describe the dragons is changed to pets. Powell draws a musical connection between the narrations by accompanying both voiceovers with the truth theme. He goes even further by replacing the battle theme with the friendship theme for the closing voiceover, further illustrating the change of the Vikings' view of dragons from pests to pets. Let's go ahead and give this opening a listen. After the opening music, we don't hear the truth theme again until the downed dragon scene, which is discussed in detail in part 1 of this series. As a reminder, this scene is the first time Hiccup and Toothless meet face to face. Hiccup finds the dragon tied up by the projectile he shot in the opening battle. The minor friendship theme features prominently in this scene as discussed in part 1. The first motive of the truth theme is heard in between the 2 times we hear the minor friendship theme. After the first emotional minor friendship theme, when Hiccup lowers the knife to his head, the camera shifts to the ropes binding Toothless. Hiccup steps away from the dragon saying, "I did this," regretful that he shot the dragon down in the first place. This is where we hear the first motive of the truth theme. It emerges above a sustained B, which was the unresolved ending for the friendship theme. This motive of the truth theme ends on a B major chord, essentially resolving the sustained B from the preceding material, which illustrates Hiccup's decision to follow his conscience over his village's expectations. His remorse from this moment will lead him to befriend the fallen dragon, learn the truth that dragons are not mindless monsters, and ultimately use that truth to change his village for the better. The next time we hear the theme, it is slightly varied. The only real difference between this truth theme variation and the regular version is the use of a major third rather than a minor third. The two versions of that first motive are shown here. Let's listen to each one side by side. As Hiccup observes Toothless and becomes his friend, this variation disappears, suggesting he has learned the truth that dragons can be trusted. The only other time the variation appears is after Hiccup's friend Astrid discovers Toothless. Hiccup stops her from going to the village, knowing the villagers will probably kill Toothless rather than accept him. The return of the variation highlights that distrust of the rest of the village. We first hear the variation in a scene titled Wounded on the soundtrack. In this scene, Hiccup finds the dragon trapped in the cove. If you recall the Forbidden Friendship scene from my first video, this is that same cove, but this is happening quite a ways before that scene. The Wounded scene is where Hiccup learns Toothless is trapped before establishing that friendship with him. As Hiccup approaches the cove, there is no music, only some lovely outdoor ambience. Hiccup notices dragon scales on the rock edge and leans down to pick one up. Then Toothless appears out of nowhere, scrambling up the side of the cliff, trying to get out of the cove. The music likewise enters abruptly with an opening flourish landing on a D pedal point held in the low strings. The music is then masked by the sound effects of the dragon until he lands back on the ground, followed by a solo female voice vocalizing in the middle to upper range. Hiccup climbs down the rocks to get a better view of the dragon as the varied first half of the motive of the truth theme enters. The truth theme variation appears in string harmonics and female chorus in the middle range. The variation is interrupted by trills and flourishes in the upper woodwinds before re-entering with the second half of the first motive, still in string harmonics and choir, as Hiccup watches the injured dragon try to fly away. Let's listen to that much. And we are just going to listen to this section. I tried changing the clip around several times, and YouTube seems to hate this one spot for whatever reason. It is under 20 seconds, and I intersperse some screenshots, and it keeps flagging it and completely blocking the video, so you can't watch it at all. So we're gonna just listen, and I'll just have a screenshot through the whole thing. And sorry about that. It's out of my hands, but go watch it in the movie for yourself. Hiccup begins to draw the dragon in his notebook as the music continues. The music pauses as Hiccup drops his pencil. The falling pencil catches the attention of the dragon, and the two characters make eye contact for the first time since meeting in the woods. The first motive of the truth theme variation returns at half the speed of the previous iteration and in a lower orchestration of horns, tuba, and male voices. Let's give that a listen. The orchestration through most of this scene, particularly the string harmonics, solo voice, and surrounding flourishes, create an ethereal, dreamlike quality, showing Hiccup as uncertain he really found the dragon. Likewise, the fragmented variation of the truth theme, broken down even more into two-measure sections rather than the usual four-measure motive, adds a hesitancy to the cue that matches Hiccup's careful attempt to observe the dragon while remaining out of sight. The shift to a lower, more grounded orchestration after the characters make eye contact shows Hiccup's acceptance that he has found the dragon and is not just imagining him. Hiccup's hesitancy and search for the truth is next seen in the return of the truth theme variation in the Dragon Book scene. This is another scene like Down Dragon, where Powell utilizes both the truth theme and the friendship theme separately to highlight different contexts. I skipped this version of the friendship theme in my previous video for the sake of time, but this is the scene where the combination 1 version is featured. Before that version of the friendship theme enters, however, we hear the truth theme variation again. As part of his training to fight dragons, Hiccup is instructed to read the Viking Dragon Book, which contains everything that the Vikings know about dragons. When Hiccup sits down to read the book, he is presented with a highly biased view of dragons passed down through generations of Vikings, showed in the instructions to kill every dragon on sight. The Dragon Book scene opens with no music and only the sounds of a storm raging outside. When Hiccup begins reading aloud, the truth theme variation enters in string harmonics, doubled by male choir. The placement of the truth theme at the opening of this scene aligns with Hiccup's search for the truth about dragons after Toothless failed to kill him twice. The instrumentation harkens back to the wounded scene, combining the string harmonics of the opening ethereal portion with the lower timbre of male voices from when the two made eye contact. Hiccup is searching for more information on the nature of dragons after having this encounter with Toothless, although he will not find what he is looking for in the Viking Dragon Book. The next time we hear the truth theme is in a scene that directly foreshadows the first flight, when we will hear the entirety of the theme for the first time. I'll save this for the next part of the series. What happens after that first flight is that Powell uses the third and fourth motives of the truth theme exclusively, with the exception of the scene where Astrid discovers Toothless that I mentioned earlier. This use of the second half of the theme seems to signify Hiccup has reached his own conclusions on the truth about dragons through his interactions with Toothless, apart from the Viking views seen in the Dragon Book. This is especially apparent directly after the first flight scene. Hiccup and Toothless are resting on a rock outcropping, enjoying some fish, when a swarm of smaller dragons approaches. Toothless and one of the smaller dragons have a little spat as one of the little ones tries to steal one of Toothless's fish. After Toothless shoots a fireball directly into the little dragon's mouth, Hiccup throws the little dragon his fish, who gobbles it up happily, then curls up next to Hiccup, who says, "Everything we know about you is wrong." At this point, we hear the fourth motive of the truth theme. It is apparent from Hiccup's line here that he has realized the truth about dragons. Let's go ahead and watch this clip. There are two other times we get a fragment of the truth theme in the remainder of the film. The first is in the kill ring scene, another scene I discussed in depth in part 1. As a reminder, in this scene, Hiccup is supposed to kill a dragon in front of the whole village. Before we reach the entrance of the friendship theme at the very end, Toothless bursts into the ring to save Hiccup from an angry dragon. As Toothless emerges from the smoke, wrestling the dragon down, we hear the fourth motive of the truth theme. Here, the theme seems to represent the rest of the villagers seeing the truth about dragons up close, although they will still tackle and capture Toothless even after seeing him risk his own life to save a human. Let's go ahead and watch that clip. The only other time we hear just a portion of the truth theme is when Toothless is lowered in chains onto the Viking ship. And here we hear both motives 3 and 4. The theme here sounds very mournful as Hiccup watches his friend helplessly. Powell could easily use the friendship theme here in a similar way to how he used it in the kill ring scene. However, I think the lack of the friendship theme helps to illustrate the betrayal that Toothless still feels after his initial capture in the kill ring. The use of the truth theme instead could also signify the Vikings' rejection of the truth after seeing Toothless try to save Hiccup in the ring. Let's go ahead and watch this scene. So that is how the truth theme functions as separate motives throughout the first How to Train Your Dragon film. Hopefully this analysis shows how just calling this theme Flying Theme really takes away from the thought and care Powell put into the placement of this theme throughout the film. The full theme is used several times in relation to flying, which I will discuss in the next and probably final part of this series. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you appreciate this content, and especially if you want to get notified about when that part 3 comes out. Thank you all so much for watching.